Well, good evening. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top stories tonight. Labour is calling on the Gambling Commission to name candidates being investigated over the election date betting scandal. Pat McFadden, Labour's Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, has written to the Commission's CEO, urging for the details to be released before polling day. It comes amid reports that the Conservative Party's Chief Data Officer, Nick Mason, has taken a leave of absence. The Tories' Director of Campaigns, Tony Lee, and his wife Laura Saunders are also being probed, as is the Prime Minister's Parliamentary Private Secretary, Craig Williams, who's admitted to an error of judgment. Well, the Labour leader has suggested that benefits offer less dignity to people than earning a living through work. Sir Keir Starmer took aim at handouts from the state in a piece for the Sunday Telegraph. He said serving the interests of working people means understanding that they want success more than state support. His comments come as the latest Savanta poll shows Labour on 42% of the vote and the Tories on just 19%. Flights have restarted at Manchester Airport after a quarter were cancelled due to a power outage. Earlier, all flights from Terminals 1 and 2 were cancelled and passengers advised not to come to the airport after a major power cut caused huge queues and disruption to baggage processing. Work is now underway to reschedule them in the coming days, and tomorrow's flights are not thought to be affected. Search teams attempting to locate British teenager Jay Slater have narrowed their efforts to small buildings close to where his phone last pinged in Tenerife. Jay Slater went missing on Monday after he attended a music festival on the Spanish island. Those conducting the searches today could be seen looking into blue barrels outside one of those small buildings. Just before he went missing, the 19-year-old called a friend saying he was lost and needed water. Well, two people have been arrested on suspicion of murder after a man died at a Bournemouth holiday park. Dorset police were called to Warmwell Holiday Park, where a man in his 70s was located in the water and subsequently pronounced dead at the scene. A man and a woman, both in their 50s and known to the victim, were arrested on suspicion of murder. The woman, we're told, was also arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. Of course, we'll bring you more on this story as we get it. And Scotland fans have been arriving at the MHP Arena in Stuttgart as they get ready to take on Hungary in their final Group A game of the Euros football tournament. The clash could see Scotland reach the knockout stage of a major tournament for the first time. Critics didn't give the injury-hit Scots much of a hope after their 5-1 opening loss to hosts Germany in Munich, but a 1-1 draw with the Swiss has placed them within reach of qualification. Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
James May gets into trouble over pride flags, Carry On films are set for a reboot, and diversity, equity and inclusion gets an upgrade. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics, and of course we'll have the latest from those lovable culture warriors who this week got an African mask removed from a museum display in the interest of cultural safety. So coming up on the show tonight, Ella Whelan will be here to tell us why pro-Palestine protests should not be banned from the streets of central London. And after TV presenter James May's tweet about there being too much bunting for Pride, I'll be debating if the month-long celebrations are just a little bit excessive. And of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our wonderful studio audience. My comedian guests this evening are Cressida Wetton and Steve N. Allen. Hello. Are you very well?
Doing all right, yeah, very well. Take vitamins.
You do take vitamins?
Yeah.
That accounts for your robust constitution.
Well, thank you.
Yes, and frankly, your beauty.
Yeah, and, you know, obviously every so often a little bit scary when you forget you've taken that many vitamins and you think, oh, I'm dehydrated. But it's not, it's just the Barocca going through.
I understand. And what about you, Chris?
I recommend vegetables and fruits.
You are old-fashioned.
I am.
Like a trad
Traditional,
wife.
Yes, that's it.
That's you.
The worst thing happens with beetroot is what I'm saying. If you forget you've eaten beetroot, the next thing you're booking in for a checkup.
OK, I think it's about time to get our audience involved. Let's go straight to them. We've got a question first from John. John, hello.
How young is too young for children to be confronted with what I see as the three main woke shibboleths: diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yes, or DEI, as it is well known. I'm actually going to be speaking to James Lindsay about DEI later on, but this is specifically, I think, John, you're talking about this Australian news which is broken. It's from the Institute of Public Affairs, and they're saying that a lot of parents are not aware in Australia of the ideological curriculum, and it's going to kids, I think as young as 3, they were saying. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, surely the kids can't understand. It must be done for some other reason. You can't teach
what would that be,
to children.
do you think?
So it looks good on your prospectus, so you can show, like, oh, look what we're doing, aren't we good?
Yes, you say that, but then the youngest child to be referred to the Tavistock was 4. And that was a child from Ireland. So, but again, that's probably people imposing, adults imposing.
So are you claiming that 4-year-old totally understood all of the connotations?
No, I'm saying they absolutely did. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, it's an age where you really should be nailing that alphabet.
Yes.
Just maybe trying to work out all this adding up, not subtracting. Let's not get ahead of yourselves. But then to suddenly go from trying to learn these basics to these difficult subjects that people still argue about.
Well, exactly. And DEI is going to, I mean, alphabetically, it's going to confuse them.
I mean, all this learning about... At 3, I think you should still be learning what crayons taste like. I don't think there's a lot to be learning. This is very cynical, isn't it? It's a bit like when banks try and make children's accounts with fun cartoons, like, get them young and then we can have them forever. If you're an activist,
but then
of course you want a 3-year-old.
It is interesting that's happening in Australia, perhaps more than it's happening here. I mean, why is that? You know, Canada, Australia, all the old colonies.
Yeah.
They seem to...
Well, there's a thing in there where you read the whole article, a lot of it is focusing on paying attention to the indigenous people, mentioning make sure you respect them. I suppose it's just more guilt. No one really did that here. You know, there were some dirty old Brits who got invaded by the Romans.
Yes.
Whereas there are some issues, I suppose, if you're Australian.
Yes,
Well,
that's right. We need more guilt, is what you're saying.
They need more guilt. We do not. No,
we have
we're
plenty
fine.
of guilt.
Yeah, I got loads.
OK.
Australia can be quite authoritarian, can't it? And
Yes.
during COVID, it was, although we've got this idea like they're all cowabunga cool surf dudes, it's like, no, there's quite a lot of...
It's pretty bad over there.
Yeah.
OK, well, let's get a question now from Gavin. Gavin?
Should museums remove artefacts from for culture safety?
For safety, this is the claim that has been made, of course, by the Pitt Rivers Museum, which is in Oxford. They're keeping these masks, these African masks, out of view because my understanding is in the original culture, only men were able to view the masks.
Correct.
And so, therefore, they don't want women of your kind, people like you,
people like me,
viewing the masks in Oxford.
That's right.
Yes.
They've decided, which, I mean, it makes me question what's the purpose of a museum, because it's surely to learn about other cultures, isn't it? They can't just have a sign on the outside that says there's some other cultures, but we're not going to tell you about them. I mean, ultimately, lots of things would become sacred and special.
Well, I mean, look, my knowledge of ancient Egypt, for instance, isn't great, but I don't think you're meant to open the sarcophagus with the pharaoh inside, but I think they do that kind of thing at the British Museum. Are they not disrespecting the ancient cultures there?
I think there's a difference between cracking open the place where someone's been buried and this mask, which we would put on display for everyone. You're not allowed to see it because you're a lady. It's like when Yorkie Bars did the It's Not For Girls campaign.
Yes.
But just done in a museum instead.
Why don't they have a separate room for men where they just put the male-only artefacts? Wouldn't that be the solution?
And the women can wait outside.
Yeah, they can wait outside and sort of make some tea or something.
Online shopping. Yeah. You've solved it, Andrew.
I mean, isn't that the most...
That sounds entirely reasonable.
That's the most progressive solution.
Absolutely not. No, they shouldn't do that. They could give, I always say, put a plaque on it. They could leave some details about the culture and say this is the context in which it would have been viewed originally. You can decide not to look, ladies. But otherwise, the problem is who's deciding who gets to see it. I suppose it's the men is the answer to that.
Well, yeah, OK, absolutely. All right, well, it's an interesting story anyway. We're going to move on to another audience question. This is from John. John. Hi, John.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. My question is, are all of our TV shows going woke?
Yeah, that's a question I hear a lot. And this week, the question was levelled about the Amazon Prime show, The Boys. Now, I only ever saw one episode of it, and I hated it so much that I decided not to carry on. So maybe I've got this wrong, but there's accusations that it's gone woke. But my understanding is that there's just been a gay character, right?
Yeah.
That's not going work. That's not what it means.
Because it is basically just gratuitous violence and sci-fi, I've been watching every episode, Andrew.
Okay.
I absolutely love it. So we're in series 4 now, and before, the main character is a bit Trumpian.
Right.
But you could spot that in series 2. I think it's series 2 where the main bad guy is literally a Nazi because she's lived long enough, because she doesn't age, because she's got superpowers. So this thread's been in there
Trump,
anyway.
right? And
there's a lot of...
But
like, the character's called Homelander.
Right.
So there's that kind of vibe to it. But in this series, there's a gay kiss with a bisexual character. The same series that includes a superhero who can replicate himself and, without going too graphic, have you seen the film Human Centipede?
Right, let's leave it there. Yeah, but this is the weird thing. I don't think that woke means what these people think it means. Having a gay character is not woke.
Well, no, that's right. But I'm not a fan for all the reasons Steve loves it. I don't watch it.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether there's an element of it feeling forced. I don't know. I know sometimes people feel a bit patronised, don't they?
There is that. It's like when they snuck in the gay kiss at the end of Star Wars, the lesbian kiss, and you thought that it really wasn't necessary.
Right. I mean,
when it felt like you were being lectured as a result of it.
Exactly, and that winds people up. So sometimes what happens is they're being accused of being bigoted about the content of the thing, and that's not actually... They wouldn't necessarily care if somebody was bisexual.
No. But this is also a show made in Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
So it's bound to be made by woke people anyway, right? So why is anyone surprised?
But the actual thing that you're discussing, the plot line that you're thinking maybe it's forced upon you, I can tell you it's not. It's actually an interesting storyline. This character kills this guy's family because he was an assassin. The next thing, kind of, they bump into each other, they have a relationship. Oh, but there's some storyline. What would it be like to be having a sexual relationship with someone with all that guilt in there? That's not forced upon kind of, oh, you should love the gay kiss.
So is it as bad as the first episode was? Because I really couldn't stand it. Does it get better?
It gets so much better.
Okay.
Oh, if you didn't watch the full first series, you don't know what Homelander's into. No. He gets his milk, put it that way. It's good for him.
Don't know what that means. I don't want to speculate. Let's move on to a question from Andrea. Andrea.
Hi. Is the world ready for a reboot of the Carry On franchise?
Are you a fan, Andrea, of the Carry On?
I am of the original, but I remember in the 90s they rebooted it with the likes of Julian Clary, and that wasn't so good. But I like the original.
So that was Carry On Columbus. That was the 31st film. But I don't see that as a reboot because it was directed by the same person who directed all the others. So it was a continuation, just with a big long gap in between. But you're right, Carry On Columbus didn't really work. Jim Dale was in it though, and he was in some of the older ones as well. I know way too much about Carry On. They are rebooting it. Well, not rebooting it, they're not remaking it or anything. They're making new ones. And I think without Sid James, Joan Sims, Hattie Jakes, Charles Hawtrey, Kenneth Williams, is there really such a thing as Carry On?
I would argue no, but that's not necessarily a reason not to do it, because is the world ready? I think the world's gagging for it, and the Carry On films. No, I think that...
You're pitching for a writer's gig.
You want to be in the thing.
Exactly. No, I think there could be a big following, couldn't there?
I mean, who's still alive? I mean, Jim Dale's still alive. He could be in it, perhaps. But that's it, I think, because Barbara Windsor's no longer with us. There's, you know, could it work? Because also it's that sort of seaside, postcard, saucy humour.
Yeah.
We're far too knowing now, aren't we? We've seen too much. Our innocence has been taken from us, so we're not going to find that funny anymore, are we?
You get if you've watched The Boys, you will not get your innocence back. Trust me.
No, there we go.
I think it's actually a form of escapism. You can watch this, and it's the silly jokes that don't really mean anything, but they're a little bit rude. Little nudge, wing, wing. It's a time to kind of let go of all the worries of things being too serious. The remake, or whatever you like to call it, the Carry On Columbus, I still remember the joke where there's the sharks in the water, and the woman says, would they eat me whole? And I can't even finish the joke, but it's such a good one. As long as there's jokes like that in it, we can all enjoy it.
OK, so it'll be full of double entendre and that kind of thing. So maybe it'll work. I don't know. I just think it's very much of its time. I'm just not sure that it'll work anymore. Anyway, OK, let's get a question from Jeff. Jeff. Hello, Jeff.
Good evening. Why is the BBC looking for dead candidates?
Well, it's not. It was a typo. Basically, there was a job advert, and the BBC was asking whether people identified as deaf. And accidentally wrote dead. But it was, do you identify as deaf, disabled, or neurodivergent? I don't think you can identify as those things anyway. You either are disabled or you aren't.
Well, yes.
I mean, well, unless you it's part of your innate sense of yourself? I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think you're right, and doubly so for deadness. I think that really is
definitely.
very binary.
Do you know what? I haven't seen people identify as dead yet. Is that the next thing? I have seen someone identify as disabled. There was a guy being interviewed on some Scandinavian TV programme who said he just always felt disabled. So he was sat there in this wheelchair, but he was perfectly fine. And the interviewer was just completely respecting this and going along with this.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
Well, fantastic. Applied to the BBC. I wonder if it's a sort of Freudian slip and they're worried their own days are numbered, because people do talk about that a lot, don't they, at the end of the BBC?
Yeah, maybe. What do you think about this one?
This was a job application for people to work in the audio department. Now... am I being harsh for saying if you are deaf?
No, but if you identify as deaf, you might actually have fantastic hearing.
Thank heavens. Yeah. In that case, then, yeah, they should hire those. That makes a lot of sense
but
now.
If you're dead, definitely not, no?
Less so. I've worked at the BBC before, and there are some people who work there who have the same level of productivity as someone who's been dead for a couple of years. So it wouldn't make a difference.
That's true. You might as well get a bunch of cadavers to run the place. Couldn't get any worse, could it? Anyway, let's move on. Next, after the break, I'm going to be speaking to journalist and commentator Ella Whelan, and she's going to be here to say why she thinks it's important that the authorities do not ban protests in central London. You're watching Free Speech Nation on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
Nana are Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
I cried, cracking out before we even start. I mean, to see King Charles be so brave, so strong, and you can sometimes, I think his stomach hurt or he just moved himself. It didn't seem very comfortable, but he was there and he was going to go through it all. And I just thought, you know, he's the most wonderful man. He cares more about us and the people who are there serving him. An extra bonus is Princess Catherine, who looked absolutely stunning. She did look very, very slim, though, but she looked beautiful in that outfit. Little Charlotte is an extraordinary child. When they were coming back, she was wiping the windows so that everyone could see with her hand, getting rid of the rain. She's fantastic. And the other thing that actually got my heart was that Prince William and Princess Anne and Prince Edward were getting completely drenched. They were on their horses. They had to go back after the festivities were over. And I thought we're jolly lucky in this country to have a royal family who will put themselves out like that and really do their very best for the nation. No, nobody ever does, and that's why our royal family is the one that's most popular. And I do have to say, and just a couple of words, that Meghan introduced some raspberry jam and some dog's biscuits just an hour before. Don't laugh.
Don't make me laugh.
An hour before. I mean, can you imagine that? The desire to be noticed. It's always just before a big event because she wants the attention. I don't think she works it out that other people would do it. I think she works it out that they'll all look at me.
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana are Queer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Pro-Palestine protests have continually taken place in central London and across the country ever since the October the 7th attacks in Israel. What has also become clear with the rise of these protests is the increase in anti-Semitism. Police forces have been under extreme pressure to get control of the protests and the abuse. But does the answer lie in banning the protests completely? Well, journalist and author Ella Whelan has written on the subject, and she joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Ella. A lot of people are saying that Jewish people who are living in central London are very nervous about going into the centre of town at the moment and being accosted by certain individuals. We have seen overt expressions of anti-Semitism from a minority of the protesters. So what is the solution?
Well, number one, I think the solution is not to panic and call for censorship. And that's not me in any way trying to downplay the genuine feelings of members of the Jewish community, because we've all seen elements of those protests. It's not the whole protest, but significant elements of them that are just grotesque, threatening, nasty. You know, you've had scenes of individuals running down side streets saying that they want to find Jews, things like that, which is, it's not political, it's just intimidation and horrible. So the reason why I say don't panic is because I think what's happened is that there's been this sort of narrative painted that central London, or any sort of part of the area, is a no-go zone for Jews because of these individuals on the protests. And I think that's, one, not true, and two, not a great message to send to Jewish people, that there are no-go zones for them. We should actually be a bit calmer and say, number one, we should argue that the police do their job, but also let's not panic about this, because when we panic, we lose a sense of sort of rationality. And I think the censorship point that I made is probably the most important, because the way to fight anti-Semitism, which should be our number one priority, is to argue about it and to reveal the inadequacies in the arguments of not just those sort of Islamist tendencies in the protest, but the whole protest has a problem with anti-Semitism. They might not all be holding pictures of Netanyahu dressed up like an octopus and all these sort of overt expressions of anti-Semitism, but the general sense in the protest is, you know, commonly understood that Israel is committing genocide, that, you know, that it's a unique state committing unique evil, and all those things leads to a situation in which anti-Semitism grows. So you can't ban all of that. How do you deal with it? You have to argue against it. And that's asking the Jewish community, I know, after millennia of persecution, to say, OK, you're going to have to toughen up and deal with these horrible people yet again. I know that's not a small ask, but I think the only way for us to get out of a situation in which we keep repeating the mistakes of anti-Semitism is to deal with it head on.
I mean, there's a lot of arguments, aren't there, about the meaning of certain phrases. Phrases like from the river to the sea. Some of the people who chant it will claim that there's nothing anti-Semitic about that whatsoever, whereas a lot of members of the Jewish community would say that, of course, it is. There's the conflation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, and there's debates surrounding all of this stuff. But are there any sort of clear-cut cases of overt anti-Semitism which is also threatening or harassing or bullying or whatever, which you would say, actually, that's when the police should step in?
I think the police should step in when there's a genuine threat of violence, incitement to violence, and when, you know, the law is broken in terms of harassment. You know, if you follow a Jewish man down the street and say, and point at them and shout at them repeatedly from the river to the sea, that's obviously stepping from political protest into the harassment of an individual. And I think you used the term clear-cut. I kind of think there can't be clear-cut lines to a degree in this, because more broadly, the sort of distinction between the freedom to protest, which is I will defend it till I die, which is a vital right in a democratic society, and wanting to take a stand against bigotry and persecution and racism, you know, that line, it has grey areas, and it's in the grey areas where we need to sort of be flexible, because, you know, we have had, in response to these really quite large pro-Palestine marches, a lot of them happening on weekends in central London, from, for example, some of the right of the Conservative Party, is to say just hit the ban button completely. Just, you know, give the police blanket new powers, you know, because, you know, the police are so good, just let's give them more powers. It's a terrifying prospect. The Lord Wolney report, which was about sort of political violence, hinged off of some of the pro-Palestine sort of march, the context of that, and then started talking about, well, we should ban protest outside, you know, the Houses of Parliament because MPs are under such threat. So you can see how it starts to, the sort of the space of freedom of protest starts to narrow, narrow, narrow.
Yes.
And the reason why we can't say it's clear-cut, because there are always going to be nuances. I mean, you know, even the issue of the phrase "from the river to the sea," I find it hard in the current context to understand why someone would say it without understanding how it sounds,
Yes.
how it offends the Jewish community.
Well, similarly, the phrase intifada, and a lot of people will say, oh, we just mean a peaceful struggle.
Yeah.
And of course, the last intifada, it wasn't people handing out flowers, was it?
No, and, you know, you can't help but compare it to, for example, there's no tolerance for someone saying, well, I used the N-word in a joyful way as a celebration. You know, it just doesn't happen because we understand that there's, you know what you're doing when you use that word. People know what they're doing when they use the phrase "from the river to the sea" or intifada. But do I want it to be banned?
Yes.
Do I want to go there to say that words are so offensive that that people need to be protected from them? No, because I'm a free speech absolutist, whether it's in relation to racism against black people, anti-Semitism against Jews, misogyny against women, all the rest of it. I think we need to just remember our principles. They're being tested at the moment because anti-Semitism is so virulent and obvious and yet so ignored by you know, lots of people in politics.
So you're saying even if there is a placard, say, that is overtly anti-Semitic, but it doesn't involve a threat, you would say that should be tolerated?
It's a disgusting sentiment, but it's part of political speech. There are lots of things that people think at the moment and say, whether it's in relation to Israel, Gaza, or whether it's in relation to some of the other more contentious issues politically that I would find offensive. I don't think we should be afraid of saying these things are offensive, and we should pass judgment, by the way.
Yes.
It's not that you say, well, this placard is allowed to stand and everyone leave them alone. You're not allowed to say anything. I would hope that, and I would want to put pressure on people on those protests to say it's your responsibility, like any of us who've ever organised a protest, it's your responsibility to turn around and look at the placards around you, and if someone's carrying something that you don't agree with, you don't kick them up the backside and get them arrested, but you say, hang on a minute, that's not what we think, and you have a row, and you hope that you persuade them to take it down.
Because we do see the sort of normalisation of some pretty ugly ideas in certain protests. We've seen signs in even protests amongst trans activists where there are signs saying decapitate TERFs and that kind of thing. In fact, some SNP politicians were photographed next to that placard. No one's looking around, or if they are looking around, they're just turning a blind eye. So you're saying that actually they have to sort of self-police?
I think we have a responsibility that, you know, free speech in a free society means that you have a responsibility to self-police, but that you set the terms of the debate. The reason I have such an objection to police interference in political life, it's not because I have some kind of, you know, bug about the police, or that I think the government has no role at all in how, you know, social norms of society, but it's that it's a fundamentally undemocratic view. It's the idea that the public can't be trusted to have conversations about big issues, live world issues like what's happening in Israel and Gaza. What has to happen is the grown-ups, the police, the state, has to step in and stop us from talking to each other. And that, you know, obviously some of the behaviour on these protests is both violent and childish. You know, it's this kind of weird mix. But I think we have to defend the idea that it's us who set social norms. It's us that defend what is right and wrong. It's us that sort of, you know, defend our political views in the open public square rather than having the authorities come in and do it for us. Because if we give away that agency, I don't agree with the government, well, this current government, I don't agree with on anything, literally anything. So why would I give away, and, you know, you take your average police officer on the street, I'm sure I wouldn't agree with them either. So if you give away your agency of saying you decide what I should think, what I should hear, what I should engage with, then you've got nothing left.
And there's something to be said for anti-Semites outing themselves, isn't there?
Yeah, but also to having their minds changed. I know that's I know that's a hard stretch to think of at the moment, because nothing, I hope, nothing would drive me, whatever context, environmentally or otherwise, to hold a placard saying death to the Jews or anything like that. But, you know, I don't think these people are unreachable. And I think actually there's a sort of a tight extremist section perhaps who are unreachable, but then there are supporters and apologists around them. I want to get at those people. I want to change those people's minds.
Ella Whelan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks.
Next on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be discussing more of the topics of the week brought forward by our lovely studio audience. Please don't go anywhere.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. A warmer night tonight compared with much of summer so far, and then a mostly fine start to the new week with a ridge of high pressure extending across the UK. Now there's a weak front approaching the far northwest. That's thickening up the cloud, freshening up the breeze across western Scotland, Northern Ireland overnight, with some patchy cloud arriving and also some patchy outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. Clear spells generally elsewhere, with temperatures holding up under those clear spells, in some spots 15 or 16 Celsius by dawn. There will be some mist and low cloud across the far southwest, and there'll be a lot of low cloud in the north and northwest of Scotland, with those outbreaks of rain affecting the west coast and the Western Isles. Elsewhere across Scotland, plenty of early sunshine to come, 15 or 16 Celsius first thing. Northern Ireland, some sun breaking through the early cloud and any light showers tending to fizzle away. Much of England and Wales, sunny first thing. There will be some mist around southern coasts and some low cloud inland as well. That should tend to lift and break up. Plenty of sunshine then developing across the UK, and even across western Scotland the cloud will thin and the rain will ease. So a fine summer's day for the vast majority, and it's going to feel hotter compared with the weekend. Temperatures reaching 26 to 28 Celsius in the southeast, up to 25 Celsius for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, mid to high teens around coasts and the far north. Now into Tuesday, another weak front pushes thicker cloud once again into western Scotland and Northern Ireland. As that moves across Scotland, the chance of some heavy showers in the northeast. Elsewhere, the heat continues to build. Temperatures rise day by day, up to 30 Celsius in places by Wednesday and Thursday.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Later in the show, I'll be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Cressida Wetton and Steve N. Allen, to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So if you've got any problems whatsoever, don't be shy. Message us at gbnews.com/your-say, and we'll help you deal with all of your issues. So let's get some questions now from the audience. Our first question comes from Anton. Anton, hello.
Do you think it's okay to still refer to someone as dear?
Well, it depends where you are in the country, doesn't it, really? But apparently this is in Suffolk. There's a story about a care home in Suffolk. They've actually introduced a waiver on names like love or dear. So, in other words, the families of the patients are being asked to sign a consent form to grant staff permission to say dear to their loved one. Now, if you're in the north of England or somewhere like that, that's actually quite normal. You don't need a consent form, do you?
Is it? To call somebody dear?
All right, love.
Oh, I don't know about that. No, I think this
We'll come to you in a minute, Steve.
I think this is, if somebody calls me dear, I always find a way to call them straight back immediately. All right, dear. Yes, thank you, dear.
Oh, do you find it patronising?
It's not for me. I mean, I wouldn't be filling in any complaint forms about it. But no, I think this is a good idea. This highlights the fact that it's a bit patronising.
OK. What do you think, Sweet Cheeks?
It's the second time you've called me that today. This is ridiculous. I mean, so I'm from the north, where I'm from, in that part of the Midlands, duck. Men call other men duck. Hey, my duck. It's absolutely fine. It's a term of endearment. It's because you can't be bothered to memorise everyone's name. You just say a nice thing to them.
It's like mate or something, isn't it?
Yeah, pal. Hey up, Sweet Cheeks.
No, mate's on the same level. Dear, it's like, it's kind of, these older people.
I don't think dear is... I hear it a lot in Yorkshire and places like that.
Yeah, and I think the older people thing actually is the opposite direction you're going argumentatively. Older people have a thicker skin. They don't mind it. They're not going to be, oh, how very dare you.
Yeah.
This isn't like Gen Z where there'll be like some TikTok about it. No one's going to me too an underpaid carer just because they called you sweetheart. That's just what you do at that age.
Yeah, and I hear darling quite a lot, don't you, in Cockney world?
Do you?
Darling.
Actually, that's what I call Paul Cox, or sometimes Petal or Treacle, but that's a very special situation.
He signed the form.
I can't believe you're actually offended by this. You surprised me.
I just think it's a bit naff.
A bit naff? OK, fine. All right, well, let's get another question now. This one actually came in from email from Yolanda, who asks, does Israel need to provide an exit plan over the war in Gaza? Wow. Well, I'm sure we're well equipped to deal with that one.
Can we go back to the previous one again? Let's talk about old people.
I mean, it's a very serious question, and it's a good point insofar as, you know, has there been sufficient thought into what happens next? You know, I mean, there's all these debates about whether Israel has the right to continue its campaign within Rafah, but there's not really discussions about, OK, once they've cleared out Hamas, what then? Because the Gaza will be in quite a parlous state at that point.
Yeah, I would say no, there's not enough of a plan there, so much so that it's causing problems within the political system in Israel. This is not one of those issues where there's two separate sides of this and, you know, people who hate Israel have a point of view. No, even within the government itself, they are splitting up about this coalition of national unity.
Well, they had the national unity straight after October the 7th, you know, and it was all sides were behind them. Now the war cabinet's been dissolved. So but it is tricky, right?
It's tricky. And you need to have, well, Netanyahu needs to have some sort of a plan that's going to make him look tough to keep the right side of it on, because he's basically teamed up with the right wing of the political system over there.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the centrists are now against him again, as things probably should be. I suppose actually you need a political system that has opposition so that you can get some clarity, and that's what you don't have during a time of national unity.
But of course, Israel never wanted to be in Gaza. They withdrew from Gaza many, many years ago. But will they have to remain there as a consequence of this, as a result?
Well, it's very difficult, isn't it? And the idea that you're just going to get rid of Hamas and then that's all gone and dealt with, it sounds very naive to me.
Well, a lot of people say you can't get rid of the ideology, but
exactly.
But you can utterly dismantle this terrorist group. That can be done.
Yes,
Although
you
if they
can.
do want to do that, maybe they ought to go after some of the leaders in Qatar,
well,
you know.
Exactly, that's the problem, isn't it? That even if you got rid of it in this one small area, the rest of the world, the ideology is still out there.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's very difficult.
But there is the more immediate question of you know, security, domestic security.
Yes.
The fact that they're dealing with a threat that's right on their doorstep.
And both of those points are answered by the fact that you simply have a plan for how you police the areas that you're in charge of. You don't necessarily have to change the point of view of the entire world. If you're in charge of a certain region, you can have a plan for how you would police it in both your security and how you stop the ideology coming back.
Yep, very tricky. Anyway, we're going to move on now to a question that's come in from Daryl. And Daryl says, is a union between Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un a bad sign for world peace? OK, well, Putin's visited North Korea to sign this mutual defence clause with Kim Jong-un. And it's never a good... I mean, they are considered part of the whole Axis, aren't they? They are. It's a gathering of the villains.
Yeah, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, the Crink nations.
Yes.
I keep saying it and it's still not caught on. I keep emailing ITN and they're not going for it. No, it is a worry, isn't it? Because these are people who can provide each other with weapons.
Yes. And remind me, are North Korea responsible when it comes to weapons and that?
Well, I preferred it back in the day when they were launching, where they were testing missiles and every single one just flopped into the sea. And eventually it seemed like they had a war on fish. But now they do seem to be able to launch them a bit more effectively, which is a worry.
It is, isn't it?
Well, I'm more worried about their friends in China, ultimately. I mean, if it was just Kim Jong-un, what have we seen from him lately? A few what are being called poo balloons being launched into South Korea. That all seems...
If you've got a nation where people are starving, filling a whole balloon of poo is difficult. Give them credit where it's due.
Well, fair enough. But it's the relationship between China, well, as you just said, the CRIC nations, that's the concern.
Well, we've spoken on this show before, you know, China sort of doing its military drills around Taiwan. I mean, that seemed to be... It feels as though that's the thing we should be talking about more, isn't it? Because if China does, in fact, attempt to invade Taiwan and America feels obliged to get involved, we are talking World War III at that point.
Yes, although so many of the things that are happening now seem to be not necessarily only about distraction, but certainly useful distractions. The news is busy with the situation in Israel and Ukraine. And so China's getting away with stuff it wouldn't be getting away with if it weren't for the fact that our newspapers are full.
Yeah, well, worrying times. Let's see if we can get a more cheerful question now. This one comes from Paddy. Where's Paddy?
I'm here. Not cheerful at all, I'm afraid. What does the panel think about whether Cambridge University should cut ties with Barclays and Lloyds?
This is happening again and again, isn't it? So we get all this situation where this is because the idea is that Barclays and Lloyds have some kind of investments with fossil fuel companies. And of course, we saw recently the book festivals, you know, losing all of their sponsorship because activists have put pressure about the company Bailey Gifford. It is annoying, this kind of thing, isn't it?
I find it very annoying. I mean, when I was 19, we were sort of screaming and had lots of ideas, but nobody was listening to us. And now it feels like people at university are sort of controlling everything. Very young people in lots of cases.
To be fair, Cambridge University, they say they're considering cutting ties on the basis of these investments. But is Cressida right, Steve, that maybe the students should be... they've got too much clout. We should just be ignoring them again like we used to?
Well, I mean, I think there's always been a history of protest. Students love a good protest. Maybe at the time when you went to university, there was less of that happening. I guess there was just Iraq War stuff. It depends. There was a gap where there wasn't a lot.
Tuition fees protest when I was at university.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? That's surprising, isn't it? You charge people money. But I don't think this is that particularly new. Maybe we talk about it more. Maybe it's a TikTok thing.
Yes.
In general, if you're a bank, you're going to want to make money, so you're going to invest where your clients want you to invest the money. That's one thing. Whatever it's not illegal to invest in fossil fuels, you can't expect banks not to do it. But universities, if they want to keep their students happy, make less money.
I mean, is there a case to say though we should just ignore the students who are making ridiculous demands? I mean, you know, there's a lot of students who are saying stuff. They've really got on board with the kind of Greta Thunberg apocalyptic view, which isn't really tethered to any kind of scientific reality.
But you could say to students, suck it up, buttercup, back when they were just getting the education for free, but now they're not just students, they are customers. They're customers.
Yeah.
And the customer is sadly always right.
Is that the problem? Is it that they're being treated like a business
Well,
now?
there's an element of that, isn't there? But, you know, you just sort of think, I think they're looking for some kind of utopia. They only want links to perfectly sound company. You know, it's like they don't want to engage in capitalism, full stop. I mean, they're all using buses and cars and stuff.
Yeah.
I find it very unreasonable.
But they still want to boycott South Africa. It's, you know, there's always been that history of it. So I think it's
but
just
there is
the
a
same
case,
thing.
I mean, you know, when Helen Joyce was at Gonville and Caius College in Cambridge and those students were banging the drum throughout the talk and preventing other students from getting in, you just want to say, look, stop banging the drum, pack your bags and go. Basically, you know, you should just chuck them out, shouldn't you?
But that's not letting a debate happen, and that I'm on the same page. Like, if you're not willing to take part in a debate, you never win it.
Yeah.
But that's different to being the customer of a university.
OK, well, coming up, after TV presenter James May got into trouble on social media for criticising the number of pride flags being put up, I'm going to be discussing whether the month-long celebration has gone just a bit too far. You're watching Free Speech Nation on GB News. Please do not go anywhere.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Plenty of mixers, plenty of lovely gin.
Yes.
What have you got here for us? Just explain what you've brought in.
So today I'm going to be presenting the Cotswolds Dry Gin and the Cotswolds Wildflower Gin.
Ooh.
So the first one that was introduced into our market was the Cotswolds Dry Gin. Now we have 9 different types of botanicals. We introduce into our pot still. We introduce well, obviously juniper berries because it's a London dry. angelica roots and coriander seeds, giving it that little limey flavour. Also, cardamom seeds, then black peppercorn, giving it a little spice.
Ooh.
And then the part that is more interesting that regards to the pouring, we have the grapefruit peel and the lime peel. We're going to start with the Cotswolds Dry, okay? So the first one introduced.
So Ellie was taking the mick out of me this morning because I said my favourite gin was, what is it, pink lemonade?
You like a pink gin and lemonade, yes.
You called me, I'm going to say what you said. You said that's a bit girly.
As you see, it turned into cloudy. Those are the oils of the spices because we don't filter it. Our gin is completely unfiltered.
Got
it.
I love this. It's 11:52. It's never too early. Cheers.
Cheers.
And would you have any... This sounds very juvenile. Would you have any snacks with gin? Or does it ruin it?
Olives.
Ah, you can tell your culture.
It depends on how you're drinking it and where you are, like what you're actually going to do with it. Yeah. But you can have pretty much all sorts. As long as it stays on the salty side, that's what I would go for.
A salty snack.
Yeah, that's what I would go for.
So olives, would you say, is that a good choice? Or crisps, nuts?
They're quite salty olives, aren't they?
It depends on your taste, really. Like, personally, I wouldn't go for it, but I have seen... And the culture behind gin is drastically increased over the years. The flavours are all different.
That's really good.
Exactly. You see what I mean?
Oh, very nice.
Like that zesty, floral kind of flavour coming through. They're absolutely stunning, aren't they?
The People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Top Gear presenter James May found himself at risk of being cancelled earlier this month when he dared to challenge Pride Month. So he went onto X, formerly known as Twitter, to argue that the rows of LGBT symbols over Regent Street could be seen as authoritarian and oppressive. He labelled the display too much bunting. And he went on to say that the excessive flag displays bear more than a passing resemblance to those which he blames for starting the Second World War. So, does he have a point, or is Pride and all the hard-fought-for rights that it celebrates worthy of grand displays and month-long celebrations? So joining me to discuss is campaigner, commentator and former Conservative Special Advisor, Charlie Rowley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Charlie, how do you feel about the Progress Pride flag, the one that we've seen endlessly throughout Regent Street?
Well, ultimately, as boring as it sounds, it's a decision for the council and the local authority, I think, to make. But I think in terms of the flag itself, it's symbolic. It symbols unity, diversity, inclusivity for a particular time of year, for a short period of time, to celebrate, I think, one day in the calendar usually, which is Pride, which is something that I think we as a nation should be proud of, the rights that we give to people, to be able to love who you love, to be able to marry the person you love. I think that is something that is a good thing and should be celebrated.
So let's just go quickly on to James May's tweet. He's comparing it, I suppose, in a roundabout way to Nazi Germany. Not directly, but he's talking about it seems authoritarian. And a lot of people have observed when they see those flags on Regent Street, and there's so many of them. I was recently in Dublin, and it's absolutely everywhere. And people feel like it's too much. Do you have any sympathy with that view?
Not particularly. I mean, obviously, if you don't like the flag, don't look at it. But I think because it's only there for a short period of time, I think the language that James used could have been worded better. I don't think it's, as he described.
So you've talked about people can just look away. They can't really, can they? I mean, it's in every shop, it's in every store. It is absolutely ubiquitous. But to go back to your point about it's a flag that represents unity, hard-won rights and all of those kind of things. I mean, my view is that that's certainly what the original rainbow flag represented, the six-stripe flag that was designed in 1978. I think the Progress Pride flag represents something very, very different. This is the one with the extra chevrons for trans rights, the black stripe, the brown stripe for racial minorities, the intersex circle, this very cluttered sort of display. And that, I think, has become associated with a particular ideological movement, the intersectional movement, the identity-obsessed movement. That's a very divisive thing. So should, on principle, I understand what you say about the council, they can make their own decision. Should the council, on principle, be flying a flag so ubiquitously that actually is incredibly divisive and doesn't even have support necessarily within the gay community?
So that is the million-dollar question, I suppose. And when you want to try and move things forward, when you want to make sure that as a society people recognise pride and the equality for people who are gay, lesbian, trans, bisexual, and where those rights weren't there previously, where it was a crime, and where actually it is still a crime around the world, but in the UK obviously it is not. What you don't want to do is, when you want to try and educate people, is to have the confusion and the constant rebranding. Big brands obviously keep their branding, and people associate, and they know whether it's Coca-Cola or McDonald's or something like that. Now, I'm not comparing the Pride movement to a big organisation, but if you keep changing things, then it loses actually people's attention when you need to be educating people more.
So would the argument that you're insinuating there be that we should go back to the original rainbow flag?
Yes, I think it does its job. I think that's what it represents. Obviously, there are, as I was doing my research before, there are many different flags to represent different parts of the community.
Yes, it's endless.
So that is, for them, and that is fine if that is, what it's there. You can't change it. But I think if you want to try and, as I say, progress the issue, to educate people, to make sure that everybody feels inclusive and something that everybody can celebrate in, I think one flag that everybody can easily identify with is probably enough, and that is the original.
That's the original flag,
yes.
Right? So, if we're sort of agreeing then that the Progress Pride flag represents something very different, something that is very controversial, and something that a lot of people find actually quite anti-gay, then at this stage it would be wise, wouldn't it, just to get rid of that in public? I mean, I'm with you that people can fly their flags, whatever flag you want. I don't think that it should be flown on people's behalf without their consent necessarily.
I see that, but look, I don't have a particular, problem with it. I don't. There are so many ills in the world. To get obsessed and lose sleep over a flag is not something that I will do.
No, I don't think it's a flag, though, Charlie. I think what it is because the ideology behind the Progress Pride flag is the same ideology that shames gay people for being attracted to members of their own sex. It's the same ideology that is responsible for young people at the Tavistock Clinic who are probably same-sex orientated being put onto the pathway to irreversible surgery. Quite very overtly anti-gay things. I know a lot of gay people who hate that flag and think it represents everything that the gay rights movement was not about. So given the severity of that, not just the fabric and the colours, which I think are quite ugly and garish anyway, so as a matter of taste, I think they should get rid of them, but just in terms of the fact that it represents such a potentially pernicious ideology. That's the point, I think.
Well, I think, no, I do think, look, and there is division within the community as well. What was the progress originally for gay people? There is a conflict now between whether it's gay spaces, whether it's single-sex spaces, whether it's men-only spaces, whether it's women-only spaces. That conversation has come to the fore. So I think it is becoming increasingly difficult, actually, as a community to be able to be united as one anyway and have one flag that represents all of those individuals.
That's a good point, because the solution is apparently to throw as much onto the flag as possible. They even added a symbol for autism. Someone else added a symbol for sex workers, and it becomes cluttered and pointless, doesn't it? Whereas actually the rainbow, there's a purity about that. It means everyone.
Yes, I think that's right. That's why I agree with you. But I think what we have to make sure that we do, whatever the flag is and whatever colour it is and whatever shape or size, that is one thing. But when you actually see in society things like the horrors at the Tavistock Centre, when you see people who are posing as trans, effectively, if you're in Scotland and you identify as a trans woman.
You're talking about the likes of Isla Bryson.
Isla Bryson, exactly. No, we have to make sure that we call those out. Everybody in society, everybody in that community calls that out for what it is and says that this is ridiculous and actually that should not be happening and that's inappropriate. But, a flag is a flag.
Here's another question, though. Is it too much? Is it, there's been a study recently, a poll in America, showing that support for same-sex marriage is going down. You talked about there being a Pride Day, but now it's a month. And there are different Pride months depending where you are in the world, so it's always going on. And, when I was in Dublin recently, I have to say, I found it annoying because it was absolutely everywhere. And is there a risk that there's a backlash? Then there's pedestrian crossings are being painted with the pride flag because apparently gay people struggle to cross the road without these colours. I mean, isn't it just, it's too much, it's annoying?
Well, people make up their own mind, I suppose. I mean, I don't...
Doesn't annoy you?
No, I honestly don't lose sleep over... I mean, because there are so many things going on in the world.
Yes.
You know, I've no issue with, if, for example, you know, a police station wants to fly the flag at a police station. If a police car is draped in the colours of the rainbow flag because there is a particular increase in hate crime against that community and the police want to stand with, you know, people who are and identify as LGBT, that is perfectly fine. What isn't fine is for the police or for police officers to be spending their time trolling through Twitter, trying to prosecute and find, you know, hate crimes there, and not doing the things that they should be doing, which is being the bobbies on the beat, tackling crime that affects all of us.
Yes.
So symbolism is absolutely fine, but if it detracts from actually the real day-to-day issues that we all face, then that's when it becomes problematic, and we shouldn't make sure that the two intertwined or overlap.
But I suppose it does detract from the taxpayer's pocket. You know, they're spending an awful lot of money on these crossings, and then they have to retrain police horses because the police horses get upset by the colours. So rather than get rid of the colours, they have to retrain the horses. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot of money spent for no reason.
Well, you know, you can make that case, but I think, look, you know, it doesn't bother me. I will still cross that road, and I'll see it perfectly well.
Yes.
But
don't scuff it because you'll get arrested for a hate crime.
I'll try my best.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Charlie Roddy, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
That's the end of the first hour on Free Speech Nation. Please don't go away. There's so much more to come between now and 9 o'clock.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. A warmer night tonight compared with much of summer so far, and then a mostly fine start to the new week with a ridge of high pressure extending across the UK. Now, there's a weak front approaching the far northwest. That's thickening up the cloud, freshening up the breeze across western Scotland, Northern Ireland overnight, with some patchy cloud arriving and also some patchy outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. Clear spells generally elsewhere, with temperatures holding up under those clear spells. In some spots, 15 or 16 Celsius by dawn. There will be some mist and low cloud across the far southwest, and there'll be a lot of low cloud in the north and northwest of Scotland, with those outbreaks of rain affecting the west coast and the Western Isles. Elsewhere across Scotland, plenty of early sunshine to come, 15 or 16 Celsius first thing. Northern Ireland, some sun breaking through the early cloud and any light showers tending to fizzle away. Much of England and Wales, sunny first thing. There will be some mist around southern coasts and some low cloud inland as well. That should tend to lift and break up. Plenty of sunshine then developing across the UK, and even across western Scotland the cloud will thin and the rain will ease. So a fine summer's day for the vast majority, and it's going to feel hotter compared with the weekend. Temperatures reaching 26 to 28 Celsius in the southeast, up to 25 Celsius for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, mid to high teens around coasts and the far north. Now into Tuesday, another weak front pushes thicker cloud once again into western Scotland and Northern Ireland. As that moves across Scotland, the chance of some heavy showers in the northeast. Elsewhere, the heat continues to build. Temperatures rise day by day, up to 30 Celsius in places by Wednesday and Thursday.
That warm feeling inside.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
3 years ago, the small town of Evanston proudly became the first local government in the... It's just outside Chicago, by the way. The first local government in the US to start paying slavery reparations to its black citizens. But now the council is being sued in a federal court for exhibiting exactly the sort of prejudice it decries. By saying, well, basically, you know, the Hispanics, the white people, they are being discriminated against because they're not getting anything.
The people that were compensated were adults, people that were adults between 1919 and 1969. Now, they lived under a time, in terms of education, in terms of the job market, they were literally barred from having certain jobs, going to certain healthcare clinics and going to certain schools. So that is a set of very distinct challenges that white people, Hispanic people, Asian people did not face. So that is precisely why they've been compensated in this way. And I think it's about £20,000 it works out to. I would have given him a lot more.
But you see, the thing is, history, we learn from history and we move on, and people evolve. And in order to reach a certain goal and a certain level of parity, which is what we all want to do, and through no way of levelling up, and this is a form of levelling up, by the way, it's nothing else, and it's divisive and it's patronising, I think it's absolutely disgusting. There were people in modern history who were discriminated against constantly, and I think it's so divisive to keep going back, to keep reiterating, to keep saying, oh, poor you, between 1919 and 1969, you couldn't get a mortgage. Well, that was wrong. No one's saying it was right. But do we need to be compensated for that?
The legal challenge is saying that this is creating more divisions.
Yes.
The past is affecting the present, but not in a good way.
The People's Channel.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top stories tonight. Labour is calling on the Gambling Commission to name candidates being investigated over the election date betting scandal. Pat McFadden, Labour's Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, has written to the Commission's CEO, urging for the details to be released before polling day. It comes amid reports that the Conservative Party's Chief Data Officer, Nick Mason, has taken a leave of absence. The Tories' Director of Campaigns, Tony Lee, and his wife, Laura Saunders, are also being probed, as is the Prime Minister's Parliamentary Private Secretary, Craig Williams, who's admitted to an error of judgment. Well, the Labour leader has suggested that benefits offer less dignity to people than earning a living through work. Sir Keir Starmer took aim at handouts from the state in a piece for the Sunday Telegraph. He said serving the interests of working people means understanding that they want success more than state support. His comments come as the latest Savanta poll shows Labour on 42% of the vote and the Tories on just 19%. Flights have restarted at Manchester Airport after a quarter were cancelled today due to a power outage. Earlier, all flights from Terminals 1 and 2 were cancelled and passengers advised not to come to the airport after a major power cut caused huge queues and disruption to baggage processing. Work is now underway to reschedule them in the coming days, we're told, and tomorrow's flights are not thought to be affected. Search teams attempting to locate British teenager Jay Slater have narrowed their efforts to small buildings close to where his phone last pinged in Tenerife. Jay Slater went missing on Monday after he attended a music festival on the Spanish island. Those conducting the searches could be seen earlier looking into blue barrels outside one of the small buildings. Just before he went missing, the 19-year-old had called a friend saying that he was lost and needed water. Well, a developing story for you now. 6 police officers, an Orthodox priest and 2 gunmen have been killed in a series of shootings in Dagestan, Russian media is reporting. The region's interior ministry says 12 other police officers have also been injured after the gunmen opened fire at a synagogue, an Orthodox church and a police post in the North Caucasus region. Both the synagogue and church are said to still be ablaze. Now, there's also been reports and eyewitness videos showing people wearing dark clothes shooting and emergency service vehicles responding in Makhachkala in southern Russia. This is, of course, a developing story. We'll bring you more on this as we get it. Scotland are playing Hungary this evening in their final Group A game of the Euros football tournament. Fans arrived in jubilant mood at the MHP Arena in Stuttgart earlier. The clash could see Scotland reach the knockout stage of a major tournament for the first time. Critics didn't give the injury-hit Scots much of a hope after their 5-1 opening loss to hosts Germany in Munich, but a 1-1 draw with the Swiss has placed them within reach of qualification. Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Let's get straight.
To Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Let's get some more questions from this lovely studio audience, and our first question comes from Chris.
Hi, will MEI cause DEI to die?
Very well phrased, Chris. This is this company, Scale AI. They're in San Francisco. They've decided to ditch DEI, that's diversity, equity, inclusion, when it comes to hiring practices. They're replacing it with MEI, which is merit, excellence and intelligence. Considered very controversial, Steve, this idea of hiring the best person for the job, irrespective of their skin colour or sexual orientation. It'll never catch on.
You're going to have to talk me through that again. Yeah. I didn't quite get what you're talking about. Yeah. It makes no sense to me. No, I mean, look, if you're the person hiring, of course you should want this.
Right.
Because then you'll maximise the productivity of the people that you are paying money to do their jobs.
Yes.
When I actually saw the headline, it said AI CEO, and I thought, finally, what they've done is get an AI to make the decisions, and they've got rid of all the nonsense, which actually might be the way to do it.
It might be. I mean, this is an interesting one because Elon Musk and various other entrepreneurs on Twitter congratulated Alexander Wang, who's the CEO of this AI company, Scale. But then when you go on Instagram to see the responses over there, it's completely different. And all these sort of they, thems and he, hims were saying this is outrageous and all the rest of it. They all had pronouns.
Well...
Because they're in the cult, you know.
Because they're in the cult, exactly.
So,
they've revealed themselves, haven't they?
So, but what... I mean, really, shouldn't we just get back to meritocracy?
Absolutely. I detest DEI. It means nobody really knows if they've got the job on merit.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, as soon as it's something that really matters, like, I don't know, the red arrows, you're not going to do that based on characteristics, or you're going to do that based on skill. And this is the way forward.
I say it should be checkable that this is the right system, because if you have a period of time where it's just based on their approximation of merit and intelligence and excellence, and it's just white guys, then you can look back and go, no, you've been doing this wrong. But it won't be that.
Yeah.
And so you'll know this is the right way to do it.
The problem with the DEI thing is it presupposes that there are these sort of baked-in systemic racist and homophobic structures within society. And so you end up, therefore, just saying, well, actually, skin colour is the most important thing. And you end up with people who aren't necessarily the best for the job. But it's happened in the in airlines, for instance, where you have pilots chosen on the basis of their immutable characteristics and not how well they can fly a plane.
Yeah, I think if you are... Maybe they should survey the passengers, because I imagine if you're actually sat on the thing, you really want someone who's got the ability to land it.
I would say so. I think that's important. And by the way, I'm going to be discussing DEI later on in the show with James Lindsay. But we're going to move on to another question now. This one was sent in via email by Janet. Don't see enough Janets these days, do you?
I've got one in my immediate family, so I see quite a lot of Janet.
All right. It's a very nice name, Janet. OK, so Janet says, after what happened in Washington, do you think driving over a pride flag should be a crime? Now, I was talking to Charlie Rowley about this in a roundabout way earlier. This is to do with the crosswalks where some kids skidded onto the big pride flag mural on the floor in Washington because, it's a road. And there they are skidding away. They got arrested for a felony for this and put into these sort of Guantanamo jumpsuits. And it was very extreme. But they are kids, aren't they?
Yeah. And well, look, we get a similar sort of thing. Every so often there'll be a news story about some 18-year-old who gets drunk and does something near a monument that they shouldn't. And the outrage is there, but you don't then Guantanamo them and lock them up for 18 years.
No.
You have to understand that sometimes kids do stuff because they think they're pushing back against a system. And it really, it's not a felony, it's borderline a traffic offence.
Well, they do sort of say that this isn't to do with it's about vandalism, but let's face it, if it weren't the pride flag, it wouldn't count. They're saying it's a hate crime.
Absolutely, and I don't think that these kids are motivated by hate at all. I think they're motivated by wanting to skid around on their scooters.
Those, yeah, whatever they are. Those.
Yeah, I don't think they're there in a deep political protest with any agenda. No, it's inappropriate. And we've got better things that we should be spending police time on.
Yeah, there's an image of one of a truck sort of deliberately skidding, and that, I mean, that's quite overt, isn't it? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a hate crime, Steve?
Well, it is to the tyres. That's taken about 6 months of driving off them.
Right, exactly. Oh, no, I don't. I think that's a bit weird. Why would you do...
It is a bit weird. I'm still not sure about Guantanamo Bay-style jumpsuits, though.
But there's better way to object.
I mean, you could call that a protest, couldn't you? And we've just been talking about that and why we should be allowed protests.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you're right to call it vandalism, though. I think that is the upper limit of, like, oh, look, you've done some vandalism. You shouldn't get 10 years in jail for vandalism.
No, that's true. OK, so we're going to move on now. Our next question was emailed in from Svetlana, who says, I recently came back from holiday in Spain, where they've been protesting against tourists. Do you think locals in Mallorca are right to be trying to ban Brits from going there? Yeah, I was confused about this story, because I saw this, all these sort of protesters in Mallorca, and the residents are hating the tourists. They're really angry about the tourists overcrowding the area, and so they're trying to stop them. But I thought that, you know, the tourists brought in money for these people,
well,
right?
that's it, isn't it? The lifeblood. It's a bit like in Cornwall. Sometimes people complain that, that all the up-country people buy up all the cottages. Like, yeah, but they do spend all the money as well, don't they? So, I don't know. It's a tricky one. I know that Brits abroad can be especially upsetting.
Annoying, yes.
Yes.
But they don't learn the language, do they?
They don't learn the
make
language.
any effort.
And they do like a drink.
They do, yes.
They do.
So, you know, are we with the protesters on this?
No, although there was some graffiti that I saw on this where people had written, tourists go home. And I thought, well, that's what they do. That's part of what makes you a tourist rather than someone who's moved in.
A very strange movement, this one. You can see an image of them protesting. I mean, they're really angry about this. They're really going for it. I mean, is it just because they steal all the best places on the beach?
But if your economy is based on, you know, people coming to the best places on the beach to have the holiday, then you kind of have to suck it up a little bit if you want to have it in your economy.
I mean, there's a lot of them,
It's a very organised protest, isn't it?
You know, I find this very odd. So they don't want the money. Clearly.
Well, I guess those particular people don't own restaurants.
I mean, look at that. You don't get that in Torquay, do you?
You don't.
I mean, they're grateful down there.
Although, I mean, maybe I'm just over-defending the Brits, but there was a newspaper story a couple of weeks ago about how German tourists are worse for drinking. We just somehow take it upon ourselves to be like, well, we are louts. Well, we're not that bad.
Is that worse or better?
Depending on, they win.
You surprise me. I've got a much better view of the Germans, but they're all drunks.
See, they enjoy the beverage.
Interesting, OK. All right, well, look, we've got another question now. This is coming in from Greg via email. Greg says, he asked if Cat Deeley was right to apologise for joking about a seizure. Or has the world gone mad, he asks. OK, well, now, this was an interesting one. So Cat Deeley, she has apologised. This was on This Morning. She made a joke about having a seizure on Monday's show. So let's have a look at the clip.
Nothing to see here.
You all right?
Yeah.
OK.
Yeah, I'm fine. Just having a seizure. Welcome back.
And so lots of people were angry. The co-host, Ben Shepherd, asked if she was all right after she began dancing. And she said, I'm fine, I'm just having a seizure. And the Epilepsy Society complained. They put on Twitter, seizures are no laughing matter. Please do better and educate yourselves. The trouble is, as soon as someone says that phrase, educate yourself, I just want to slap them.
Yeah. It's not as if epileptics own seizures. Many reasons to have a seizure. That feels very much people who, you know, if your temperature goes too high, you have a febrile seizure.
Yes.
Let's give some props where it's due. There are many different seizures out there.
So they don't own it.
Exactly.
Right.
But also, she didn't. I mean, even in her apology, she did say it was a light-hearted comment. And some people say, well, it's not that light-hearted if you have a seizure. No, she knows that. Having a seizure isn't the same as what her comment was. You can separate the two things out and realise she didn't wake up that morning and think, you know, I'm going to ruin the lives of epileptics. No, she just said a thing. She didn't mean any harm by it and has had to apologise to try and make the storm go away.
Yeah, but it's a weird one, isn't it? Because she obviously didn't do anything wrong.
Of course she didn't. And it's very patronising, isn't it, to people with epilepsy to think that that would finish them off, that they couldn't cope with a Cat Deeley joke. I mean, if you can't cope with a Cat Deeley joke, you've got bigger problems.
It's funny, though, isn't it, the way that people get so upset about things that affect them particularly, you know? They wouldn't get upset about a comparative thing involving another group, you know?
Well, I guess not. I mean, I'd like to know, you know, who are the people that complained? You said lots of people at the beginning. Is it lots or is it a few very vocal people?
Yeah, that's true. OK, well, look, we've got a question being sent in as well by Tom. Tom says, do state schools make you fat? Well, my state school, we had a lot of chips. that was all we ate, chips. But actually, this is to do with an article in the Times this week that says the best way to avoid middle age spread is to go to private school. They've done this research, and they said that people in their mid-40s who are educated at state schools are basically going to be fatter. But actually, Steve, that's just because they're poorer. And poorer people don't eat as well as the posh lot, right? Isn't that it?
I remember mid-40s, I went to a state school. I feel very seen right now, but it's easy to see me because of all the fat.
Right.
But it's
you can sue the school.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you're right. It's two different symptoms of a cause that's higher up the chain.
It's not to do with going to that school. No. It's to do with money.
Look, if you go to one of those schools, you're in the top 7% of people being educated. So, of course, you've got plenty of money in the back pocket. And it is true that richer people, posher people, tend to not be fat because they eat better. Yeah. They don't have a life that is so miserable that the only small amount of joy that you get are those 5 donuts for £1 that you can get from some shop.
Exactly.
Oh, those donuts are good.
They are. I shouldn't have got you started on that. That's the point, isn't it? You know, posh people, they're normally thin, they're normally super confident. I've got a real chip on my shoulder about this.
Can I eat that chip, please?
Yeah. but it's true, isn't it? It's not the suggestion that there's some kind of causation here between going to state school and being fat.
There's a little bit of skiing holidays and the rowing team, maybe. I don't know. But no, it's a cultural difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know they're trying to pin it on bigger playing fields at private schools, but...
Is it that? Is that what they're saying?
Well, it's one of the factors, but I think this is correlation, not cause, isn't it?
OK. Well, look, next on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be discussing the London academics suggesting colleges and universities ditch classical philosophers for more modern and diverse alternatives. You're watching Free Speech Nation on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The University of Cambridge has told students to stop flirting with staff under a new policy banning sexual relationships with professors. The new rules, which come into force next month, beginning of July, include a warning against behaviour that could be interpreted as flirtatious. University staff have been told they must report any behaviour that could constitute a student making advances towards a personal, particularly intimate relationship with them. If you're a tutor, how do you interpret what is flirting and what is just sort of like having a bit of banter?
In fact, you've got some
very nice trousers, by the way.
Thank you.
You see, you didn't even recognise.
Oh, I didn't. I think I'm blushing now. I'm blushing.
So, what's flirting? What's me complimenting your very well-fitting trousers? Yes.
Well, there is a line, because obviously when you're 18 and you go to university, it might be the first time you're away from home. It might be the first time that you're open to maybe a bit of a nightlife, social activity, drinking and all the rest of it. On the flip side, I know a couple who, the pupil ended up dating their professor, and they've been together for about sort of 15 years now. So I used to go after lectures with my professor and the whole seminar. We used to go to the pub afterwards, and I became very good friends with... she was a mature student. She was on the very, very far left of political. You wondered where that was going for a second, didn't you?
We're both reading issues, thoroughly.
Very quick for you, Joe. We're running out of very nice trousers as well. We're running out of time.
Not as snug as Charlie. I think you've got to have some rules in place that there's no abuse of power. Policing it's difficult. We ought to be in a position where you can say, get off, back off, or, banter's fine. Actually, I hate that word. I hate it almost as much as woke. Go on, email in.
Thank you very much. I'm flirting with both.
The People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex, and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. The School of Oriental and African Studies, or SOAS, has produced a toolkit for schools and universities which dismisses the study of classical Greek thinkers, such as Aristotle, Plato and Socrates, as armchair theorising. New Age thinkers who are being recommended instead include an Indian-American feminist, a Nigerian gender theorist, and a Japanese Zen expert. The aim of the guidance is to decolonise philosophy by getting rid of dead white men. But it's not going down too well with some academics who argue that it's an attempt to erase the identity and achievements of Western civilization. So joining me to discuss this is writer and broadcaster Emma Webb. So Emma, thank you for joining us. So Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, armchair theorisers, are they?
The original report on this quoted Sir Roger Scruton saying that it demonstrates an unwillingness to overcome their ignorance. Obviously, he's no longer with us, so he didn't say that about this specific case.
Yes.
But look, it's part of what we've seen in the sort of attack on objectivity, the idea that rationality itself, reason and objectivity is in some way colonial or systemically oppressive. I've got the quote here actually saying the toolkit, when setting out its position, says that much academic philosophy in the UK, US, Australasia and continental Europe masks its structural antagonism to everything that is not white, bourgeois, male, heteronormative or able-bodied. I mean, it does what it says on the tin. It's an ideological attempt to purge the Western canon and to replace it with what I think, in their mind, is what you would call different ways of knowing.
Of course. I'm not so sure how heteronormative ancient Greece was, to be honest. But anyway, that doesn't matter.
They do have a certain reputation.
They do. I mean, so the thing about SOAS, I mean, you could say, well, look, SOAS is the School of Oriental and African Studies. Of course, they should be talking about philosophers from the Orient, from Africa, right? Because it's in the name. But they're suggesting guidelines for everyone else.
Yeah,
they're suggesting that philosophy as a discipline ought to change.
Well, that's the joke, is that one of the authors of this toolkit has complained that he didn't study enough of the Middle Eastern literature.
Yes.
The SOAS was set up with the explicit purpose of studying literature from the Middle East, from Asia.
Yes.
So firstly, it would be pretty surprising if SOAS wasn't focusing on that, but I don't know if they're trying to do themselves out of business by suggesting that others focus on that as well. It's just simply not true that if you want to study literature, philosophy, poetry from outside of the Western canon, that you can't do that. When I was at university, which was just before the woke revolution really blew up, I studied Hebrew. I was primarily interested in Hebrew poetry, in very, very niche stuff that wasn't really anything to do with the Western canon. But the idea that you would dismiss the value of Aristotle, of people like G.E. Moore or Hume, and the idea that they're in some way embedded in colonialism, is just nonsense. And there's a kind of irony to this, because it's coming from this place of cultural rights, of viewing all cultures as equal. But when you actually look at it, in its plainest sense, when you remove this kind of structural framework, value framework that they're imposing on the Western canon, what they're saying is that some cultures are more equal than others, and actually it's acceptable to not only acceptable but also morally mandatory to undermine the Western canon, undermine the knowledge base of Western culture, effectively.
Yes.
And it's just simply not the case that these writers should be relativised in this way.
Well, also, isn't there something quite obviously anachronistic about this? We have this current obsession with identity, which wouldn't have occurred to Plato. You know, it's just not something that's on his radar. You know, so it's sort of impose these values. It's very narrow thought. It's only going to be a fad for a few years. So even in 10, 15 years' time, this kind of approach won't make sense. So why do they think they've got all the answers?
Well, I think the reason why they think they have all the answers is because they're arrogant. I think it's hubris, and it's the hubris that comes along with being an ideologue, and we've seen this time and time again. You've written extensively about it, Andrew. So, but I think that it's also false, and actually with a lot of these ideological progressive
claims. When you actually examine them, they turn out to be false, like the Church's case for paying reparations, for example. But the accusation that our ancestors and that the founders of the Western canon weren't interested in other cultures is simply not true. In fact, when they do show an interest, they get accused of Orientalism or some other historic crime. So it's just, that's simply not true. And the hubris that they think that they're not imposing their own ideological framework.
Yes.
These being people that believe that everything arises from power structures, but don't have the self-awareness to see what they're actually doing, and imposing this. They call it decolonisation, but I think it's actually ideological colonisation of our universities.
Yes, and of course, you know, there were power structures in ancient Greece. There was a slave system there. It wasn't based on racial grounds. You know, this is. It's interesting, though, that they are going back to this again and again when it feels incoherent when it comes to this kind of philosophy. And it's also suggestive that you can't understand or get anything out of, say, Plato's Republic, unless you are white, unless you are male. I mean, is there any truth to that?
Well, it's lived experience, isn't it? And lived experience goes hand in hand with this awful term, different ways of knowing.
Yes.
The idea that you have to have some kind of identity resonance with a person in order. Nobody can have a real identity resonance with Aristotle as an ancient Greek.
Yes.
Even the modern Greeks wouldn't be able to really, in this lived experience sense that that they're describing. And it's this idea that is fundamentally actually against Western tradition, this idea that you can't transcend your own the strictures of your own identity, that there is no objectivity, that everything is relative to your own experience. And then you see this this kind of eisegesis, this reading into history, reading into sources, and they call it methodology, but it's really ideology, and it distorts things. It distorts the Western canon and destroys it. And I think there's a purpose to that, because they are trying to deconstruct power structures. They believe that everything is saturated in those power structures, and that is an inherently destructive approach. And we're seeing this not just in universities, but also in our museums, with this recent news about the masks being removed from display, lest they be lest they sort of be defiled by women's gaze.
Yeah. It doesn't sound very progressive to me.
No, and actually this goes back to the point about all cultures being equal, because it's in a progressive in the real meaning of the sense, liberal democracy, the idea that I, as a woman, wouldn't be able to see or study academically this sacred object because there is some taboo within a particular culture, and that this is a culture that still to this day won't allow the descendants of slaves to marry freeborn people, the descendants of non-slaves, and the idea that that shrunken heads should be removed from display, when these shrunken heads, the idea behind them is that, you decapitate your enemy and you shrink their heads so that their avenging spirit can't escape from it. It's just absurd that we're trying to form our intellectual access to certain artefacts or certain knowledge within universities according to the taboos of another culture that are fundamentally opposed to our own. The idea that there are certain things in universities or certain things in museum collections that women shouldn't be allowed to see because the culture doesn't want them to see that. It's madness. So when you
absolutely, Emma Webb, unfortunately that's all we've got time for. But thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. And next on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be speaking to the American author Dr. James Lindsay about a new bill in Congress aiming to put a stop to diversity, equity and inclusion requirements in schools and federal institutions. Don't go anywhere.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. A warmer night tonight compared with much of summer so far, and then a mostly fine start to the new week with a ridge of high pressure extending across the UK. Now there's a weak front approaching the far northwest. That's thickening up the cloud, freshening up the breeze across western Scotland, Northern Ireland overnight, with some patchy cloud arriving and also some patchy outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. Clear spells generally elsewhere, with temperatures holding up under those clear spells. In some spots, 15 or 16 Celsius by dawn. There will be some mist and low cloud across the far southwest, and there'll be a lot of low cloud in the north and northwest of Scotland, with those outbreaks of rain affecting the west coast and the Western Isles. Elsewhere across Scotland, plenty of early sunshine to come, 15 or 16 Celsius first thing. Northern Ireland, some sun breaking through the early cloud and any light showers tending to fizzle away. Much of England and Wales, sunny first thing. There will be some mist around southern coasts and some low cloud inland as well. That should tend to lift and break up. Plenty of sunshine then developing across the UK, and even across western Scotland the cloud will thin and the rain will ease. So a fine summer's day for the vast majority, and it's going to feel hotter compared with the weekend. Temperatures reaching 26 to 28 Celsius in the southeast, up to 25 Celsius for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, mid to high teens around coasts and the far north. Now into Tuesday, another weak front pushes thicker cloud once again into western Scotland and Northern Ireland. As that moves across Scotland, the chance of some heavy showers in the northeast. Elsewhere, the heat continues to build. Temperatures rise day by day, up to 30 Celsius in places by Wednesday and Thursday.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Last week, a new item of legislation was introduced in the US called the Dismantle DEI Act. It immediately attracted 20 co-sponsors in Congress. The bill could mean diversity, equity and inclusion requirements would be dropped from schools and corporate boardrooms and effectively rescind President Biden's executive order from 3 years ago, which pushed DEI into government-run agencies. So for more on this, let's go live to the US. I'm speaking to the author and founder of the website New Discourses, Dr. James Lindsay. Welcome to the show. I want to ask you about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. A lot of people over here in the UK, they hear that and they think, what's wrong with that? That sounds great. Everyone gets a fair shot. Perhaps you could explain what it really means.
Yeah, that's the thing is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion has just like the best branding operation ever. And that's what people have got to learn to see it as a marketing program. These words actually have two meanings. If we kind of play the fancy language game, they have an exoteric meaning, which is what you think they mean. Oh yeah, I like diversity. I think people should be included. All right, equity sounds like better equality. Okay, great. But they have an esoteric meaning, which is what the activists are using once they get in a position to be able to weaponize this, which is why we need to dismantle it. Diversity is very simple. It means diversity against the prevailing values backdrop. In other words, British values for you, American values for us. You see this in the documentation they put out. What does white supremacy culture look like? They say it's punctuality, it's hard work, it's valuing the written word. It's these things that are just basic functions of a productive society. And so they mean diverse as compared to that. And so diversity actually means to politicize. It means to bring in political elements. Inclusion means something completely different. Inclusion actually means to accommodate. It means that when you bring in people who either can be radicalized or who are already activists who are radicalized, and you don't need very many to mess up an institution from the inside. Once you bring them in, now you have to accommodate them so they feel included. If their ideology says that, you know, you can't say this kind of thing or act this sort of way or dress that sort of way or present this sort of thing at a museum, as you talked about in the last segment, then you've got to make changes in order to accommodate, to include these people. But what you're including is their ideology. You're not including them as individuals, and that's the little linguistic trick. Equity has a definition, which is an administered system in which shares are adjusted so that participants are made equal, which is the definition of socialism as well. So it's a socialist program. Diversity is to bring political activists into the program, and inclusion is designed to make you accommodate their ideology in the institution. So it's a complete scam, which is exactly why it should be dismantled out of all of our institutions as quickly as possible.
So has this now very much become a left versus right issue? Is it the case that if you want DEI, vote Biden, if you want it gone, vote Trump?
Yeah, unfortunately, it really has. It shouldn't be, but because of the nature of the tribal politics that have been manufactured around these issues, it is. And so if you want more of this DEI, it's vote Biden, I guess. And if you think that this DEI, if you see through the scam, then you better vote Trump in order to try to stop it. I had the good fortune of briefly meeting J.D. Vance the other day, who forwarded this bill, and I think he's got his head on straight about this. It's extremely important, but it has become partisan. That's what I call the politics of compliance, where you say this is how everything's going to be, and it's going to be a lot better when we all do this thing. Everybody who complies gives in, and then they are taught to resent the people who resist. We would have a more inclusive workplace if only these racists and transphobes and homophobes and sexists and misogynists and everything else were silenced or kicked out. And so you end up making this dynamic that's extremely polarizing and extremely divisive. And actually, it's a playbook straight out of Mao Zedong's divide and conquer methods that he used to take over China.
So since the Claudine Gay scandal at Harvard, there appears to have been a bit of a backlash against this DEI movement. Do you see that gaining momentum? Do you think that more and more people are now waking up to this and saying, actually, this isn't something that we want to support?
Yeah, well, people are very quickly realizing that it's not what they thought they were buying into, that there's something different to what they thought they were getting. So they heard, as many people do, they heard the marketing program. They heard, you know, diversity. That sounds great. Diversity is our strength. Inclusion. Who wouldn't want people included? Equity, better equality. They heard that and they said, yeah, let's do that. And what they found out is that they got sold poison in the form of what looked like, you know, a beverage or whatever. So they've been fooled, and people are quickly waking up to the fact that they've been fooled and that this is damaging their companies, it's damaging the universities, it's damaging the government apparatuses, it's damaging everything it touches, which is, I would argue, what it's designed to actually do. It's a quiet takeover tool. It's designed to do a coup inside the institution, and people are waking up to this, I think, just in time to be able to fight back against it.
Now, this week we saw an artificial intelligence company in America, Scale, announce its MEI policy for hiring, the idea of merit, excellence and intelligence. And actually, people like Elon Musk congratulated Alexander Wang, who's the CEO, but a lot of people also said, this is outrageous, you shouldn't be doing this. There is no such thing as meritocracy. That's a very subjective idea. Where do you stand on that?
That's such a ridiculous communist trope that's been trotted out for over a century, over and over and over again, especially in the West over the last 30 years. It's just a completely ridiculous claim. The fact of the matter is that there, as Jordan Peterson has pointed out, for example, there's always a hierarchy that develops. I've been reading the history of Mao Zedong's China over the past few weeks in tremendous detail, and one thing that I was struck by, that I took away, and I saw it in Soviet Union as well, is the amount of competitiveness that you have with communists. They aren't competing on merit or the capacity to produce, as we might call it. They are competing instead on their ability to implement communist ideology more effectively. And the competitions are explicit. Mao set them up explicitly for his leaders to compete with one another over who could do a better job making his death quotas or his imprisonment quotas or his land reform quotas or whatever other destructive programs he had. So there's always a hierarchy. It's always based on some idea of doing well at something, which when we say that it's doing well at producing, we call it merit, being able to do the thing. Well, when you have an ideological program in place, they're competing in terms of merit for being able to implement their ideology. We don't mean that by meritocracy, of course, but that's what that's just the nature of human beings and organizations. But don't let them fool you. Meritocracy is always in operation, and it can either be enthralled to an ideology or it can be subject to actual reality, at which point you get positive results.
And where does this leave people from ethnic minority groups, for instance, who will say, some people who would argue this is just a continuation of affirmative action, there are racists that still exist within these structures, and therefore certain people do need a leg up. They do need to sort of tweak the system in order to achieve fairness. I mean, do you think there's anything to that?
I don't anymore. I think I would have 5 years ago. I think actually what these last few years have taught me is that the best way to give people a leg up is to tell them that if you get busy and work hard and you actually don't have any barriers in their way, legitimate barriers, if you tell them to get their act together and work hard, that they will rise to that occasion and then they will climb their way out. I think these patronizing programs, oh, you need help in order to participate equally in society, have actually done nothing but damage virtually everywhere they've been implemented.
Finally, James, I mean, surely when it comes to jobs such as people who are flying airplanes, for instance, or people who are working in the medical profession, everyone can see, irrespective of your ethnic background, that meritocracy has to prevail. And yet we still have people suggesting otherwise. Why do you think that people can't let this go?
It's complete ideological contamination. That's the word that I use to try to avoid saying demon possession, just to be a little colorful. But the fact of the matter is that their social, psychological, and often professional lives are in any kind of a totalitarian environment. And again, I hearken this back to Maoism and thought reform. Once you are introduced to this kind of social circle that you're in, you constantly have to signal that you're a part of it or you risk being thrown out. That's what cancel culture was. It was, of course, life and death under Mao in China. It's professional life and death here in the West. It's not quite the same problem. But if you don't signal and continually deepen your signal to the fealty to the ideology, you risk being purged yourself. You risk being canceled. You risk the struggle session being brought upon you. And so there is not a conscious fear so much as an unconscious fear and a desire. If you read the history of how Mao Zedong manipulated the Chinese population, they had what they called a cult of confession, where everybody felt like they always had to confess against their crimes, but they also had to accuse other people in order to kind of take the heat off of themselves. And I think that people are caught up either in A, not understanding it very deeply, not realizing what they're actually dealing with, taking the words at face value, or B, that they're caught up in these social and emotional and psychological traps that make them continue to defend it.
James Lindsay, it's been absolutely fascinating. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yes, sir.
And next on Free Speech Nation, a fan falls asleep at the football and Mr. Blobby appears on Breakfast TV. And I'm not referring to Ed Balls. It's almost time for Social Sensations. Don't go anywhere.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GBNews Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
What about the elections? Because it seems that the King and everything is moving because of it, and we've got a lot of royal engagements and things that happen at this time.
Yes, well, it means that he has to take more time and be at home. He can't go to all the things he wants to do. He's been doing 5 a day, which is probably made Camilla a bit cross. But what they still hope is that they can get the Japanese emperor and empress over. That's in July. That they can go to France for the 80th anniversary of the fighting. And he will be able to do 1 or 2 things, and Ascot he's very keen to do. Now, those aren't things that are political in any way. Just want to talk about Harry and Charles's argument, where Harry said he didn't want to stay, he wanted to go to a hotel. And it's come out now that actually King Charles is believed that he was put into, offered St James's, and Princess Anne stays there, and Beatrice stays there.
And this was for when Harry came over
when
for
he
his
came
10th
over, yeah,
anniversary for
exactly.
Invictus.
And the policemen are wandering around with guns, and there's no chance of actually there being any problem there. So the fact that he said that it wasn't safe for him was not actually a very sensible thing to say, I don't think.
Well, he went to Nigeria, and that is, in the world ranking, it's ranked as quite a dangerous place.
Yes, one of the dangerous places in the world. But now Harry and Meghan have been invited to go to Ghana.
Oh, God. Well, it's interesting because my parents are from Ghana. I have Ghanaian heritage, and I'm thinking she'll probably then claim there's a percentage that she's Ghanaian as well. I'll be like, hang on a minute, you were Maltese, you're also Nigerian,
and
now you're going to say you're Ghanaian and German.
Yeah.
Come on. Thank you very much.
Squeeze it in.
Yeah, let's get them all in. Angela Levin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The People's Channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. It's time for Social Sensations. That's the part of the show where we look at what's been going viral this week on social media. First up, I know football can send some people to sleep, but in this video, one England fan found himself still in the stadium the morning after the match, having enjoyed one too many beers. Let's have a look.
Just walking out. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm shivering, it's joking around.
Well, at least we know the ushers don't clean up afterwards. Do they have ushers in football?
That's what they're called, yeah. They're ushers, yeah. You're really down with the...
Yeah. Do they sell programmes?
Yeah, in the interval.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. What I love about that is he bothered to film it. I mean, if I woke up somewhere, I'd be so embarrassed, I would be removing all evidence. Yeah. The fact my drinking means I trespass, but no, I'm filming it, I'm in absolute state. Look, and he just shows everyone.
Well, he may have sent it to one trusted friend who's leaked it.
Oh, that's probably
Where did he sleep? I mean, there's all those...
It must be on the floor, right?
I've been to sports stadiums very occasionally with my dad. There's not a lot of space. It's all seats, isn't it?
I love that. I've been to sports stadiums once or twice. You're a real salt of the earth type, aren't you? So
says the interval guy over here early on.
Yes, but...
No, I've been, and I don't know where... It doesn't look like a good place
Wouldn't
to
be comfortable,
stay.
would it? No, well, I don't know. After that 11th pint, you can kind of sleep everywhere, can't you?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you just... in the old days, I spent so much time in High Barnet. I didn't live there, but that was the end of the tube line because I'd have to get the number 80
Yes, I actually fell asleep in a toilet in a train at Lowestoft. Actually, I shouldn't admit that, should I? It's covered in milkshake. Anyway, next up is this video from ITV's Good Morning Britain, where Mr Blobby's appearance gave Noel Edmonds something to say about Ed Balls.
Come here.
Right,
Come here.
Come here. Whoa!
The only thing that can be said about this...
Yeah, was never, ever do it again.
He makes Ed look slim.
Right. Still to come.
So why isn't the headline Noel Edmonds is fat-shaming Ed Balls? I mean, that's worse. Do you miss Mr Blobby?
No, but I do miss in the old days, probably in the 80s, there was always a risk that an interview would be attacked. Normally it would be Rod Hull and Emu.
Yes.
And I mean, there's no way you get away with that these days. Like Rod Hull just... like crotch grabs.
Properly attacking
like a
people.
proper Donald Trump-style grab.
Yeah.
And he'd get away with it because you have a fake bird on your hand, which actually does make more sense now. Maybe that's the way to try it. All right, I'll try that.
That's what Grace Jones should have done. You remember when she slapped the interviewer? I can't remember who.
Russell Harty.
It was Russell Harty, wasn't it? Yeah. Tell Grace Jones. She's as mad as Emu, isn't she?
We like to compare them.
Yeah, very similar.
One's a lot classier than the other.
No, that's true. What do you make of this?
Well, you're quite right. It's fat-shaming, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm shocked. But
Mr Blobby, there was something quite satisfying about how anarchic it was. The fact that he would just trash the set.
Yes,
and get
that
a
was
Christmas
his
number
thing,
one.
wasn't it? Yeah, trash the set, get a Christmas number one. What's he teaching us about bad behaviour? More of it.
Yeah, there we go. Bad role model. That's the argument here. Anyway, next up, cancel culture has gone mainstream as ITV are set to launch a drama all about it.
that's all for today. Same time tomorrow?
Why not? See you at 6.
And that's us off air.
I've been a tweet. What tweet? Overheard presenter Douglas Bellows making an extremely sexist joke at a wedding.
It was probably just one of your usual ones, yeah? My usual ones. Your usual misogynist ones. It was sexist, not misogynist.
This isn't news.
So, I mean, it looks like the drama department are catching up then with council.
Yeah,
It's good in a way that it's being represented now.
Yes.
But you know, it's been going on quite a while.
Well, it looked good from that tiny clip.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know.
called Douglas is cancelled, by the way.
Douglas is cancelled.
That's the title, yes.
Right,
Yes.
OK.
So that's what it says on the tin.
I look forward to it, but I'd be interested to see how this plays out.
Yes.
It can't be that outrageous, can it, in our sensitive climate?
Will they show the thing he's cancelled for? Because I think actually, if you were writing a
Exactly.
drama about this, what would be quite bold is to have someone cancelled for something that's actually really dodgy. And that would be quite an interesting, dramatic approach. I doubt they're going to take that here.
No,
but I don't know.
There's no plot twist at the end then. There is, you know, it's like, oh, yeah, this guy's wrong and shouldn't have said that. Good. And the audience just hopes that he gets cancelled sooner. Why did we take 4 episodes for this to happen? I think the bigger risk is it's got the word cancelled in its title and people go in the TV guide and go, oh, I guess it's not on. And they're not.
OK, well, look, now's the part of the show where we're going to talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. We got one in from a Susie. Susie, thanks for writing in. Susie says, since the football started, I've developed a thing for Alan Shearer and now find myself being attracted to bold men. Any tips on how to shake this fascination? Well, the first thing I'd say is why shake the fascination? Bold men can be really sexy.
Why shake the fascination? Why would you do that?
It's what's that Grace Jones' song, Shake the Fascination?
Well, it's something up to your bumper. She did that one. Yeah.
Okay.
She pulled up to my bumper.
But that's a weird thing to ask, is it? I mean, really, what's wrong with fancying bold men?
Why are you asking me specifically? I feel targeted.
I'm just interested why that would be an issue.
We all know that the reason we're bald is because we're sexy, or something like that. I can't remember. It's something to do with testosterone.
It is to do with testosterone.
And then ... we're sexy. So just get over it. Just enjoy it. We are, you know, we don't leave as much hair around. We're like one of those hyperallergenic cats.
It does seem a bit odd that she wants to... if that's her natural inclination, why would you want to shake it? You know,
I think in this day and age, that's a very middle of the road. It's very acceptable, isn't it?
Yes.
Maybe she wants something more exotic than bald men. Maybe she wants to be more interesting.
It's acceptable. We're not a kink.
No, exactly.
That's what you think, Steve.
It's not like I'm innately attracted to hamsters. What should I do? Because that is an issue. You would see someone about that, wouldn't you?
Yes, you would.
Pet shop.
Yeah, pet shop. OK, look, we've got a dilemma now coming in from Jensen. Jensen says, my wife desperately wants to rescue another dog. We already have 2 rescues, and I'm going through a change of jobs, so I'm feeling a bit uncertain about my long-term financial security. How would you tell her to relax and wait for a bit longer? It's a tricky one, isn't it?
It's very tricky.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to adopt all the dogs?
Well, exactly.
I want to adopt all the...
Because if you don't adopt the dog, you're a monster, right?
But you can't adopt them all, Andrew.
No,
you just have to keep looking on TikTok and Instagram at all the lovely dogs and try and sort of get over it that way.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
But if you can adopt a 3rd dog, I say go for it.
I think if you've got 1 dog, you may as well have 3.
Yeah,
right?
that's the spirit.
No, but it's true.
Or
I don't
100.
think it's that much more work. Isn't it a bit like having triplets instead of 1 kid? It's basically the same amount of work, isn't it?
Probably. Yeah, that sounds true.
No. Having recently gone from 1 child to 2 children, the increase is bigger than the sum of its parts.
There is an increase.
Yes, definitely.
I thought they just sort of packed together and sort of you throw them the same food.
We're still talking about kids, or we're talking about dogs?
Either.
We'll leave them outside, put them in the kennel. What? Hey? No, don't do that, because if you rescue 3 dogs, already she sounds like the kind of person who'll go on about the fact that they rescued it. You know those people.
Yeah.
You didn't rescue it. You didn't mount some operation in the middle of the night with guns and getting it out of whatever it was being held. No, you took a cheap dog.
The thing is, Steve, the thing is, really, it's the dogs that rescue us.
Oh, oh, Cressida. Oh. All right. Our 3rd dilemma this week is from Georgia. Georgia says, I happen to know my old school friend is earning extra cash from OnlyFans. Don't ask me how I know. I just do. But she's from a very churchy family and can be quite judgy. How do I let on that I know to put her in her place? But why would you want to do that? So this woman's doing church-themed OnlyFans.
Well, I think you've made an assumption there.
Oh, have I? OK, I thought that was
I suspect she's not doing a church-themed performance. Is that the word?
Yes.
It could be a deep fake. Are we sure that it's definitely the same person?
Yeah, exactly. We don't know.
I'd be very careful before you start making accusations.
Steve, what would you do if you found out that your friends were on OnlyFans? Would you tell them that you know? What do
Well,
you
I
think?
suppose it depends. I mean, how much they're charging. Because if it's like $10.99 a month, I'd be like, well, mates rates. So maybe I could get it. No, you wouldn't, because what an embarrassing conversation. Go, oh, I saw you doing the old porn the other day. That's never going to go well, is it?
But Georgia wants the power. That's what's going on here.
Yeah.
Georgia wants to insinuate that she knows, so that she...
Still, why are you rifling through some website that's got all that on it and suddenly come across your friend, which is the wrong phrase?
It also doesn't sound like they're very good friends.
No.
If you just want to sort of get power over people, that's not a friendship, is
As
it?
always, I'd like to know more. How did this person come to know about that person?
Yeah, well, Georgia, if you're watching, come and we'll do an interview about it.
I'd love
no, we
that.
won't. Let's not do that. OK, well, look, our final dilemma comes from Martha. Love Martha as a name. What a great name.
I think Andrew suits you.
Do you think?
Yeah.
That's because it means manly.
Well, there you go.
If you like Martha and you don't like sci-fi, Superman versus Batman.
What, is there a Martha in that?
Oh, my days. Oh, I daren't tell you, I'll ruin the ending.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that one. OK, well, you're opening my eyes tonight. OK, so this is Martha's dilemma. Martha says, good name for a film, that, Martha's Dilemma. Anyway, right, this is what Martha says. My boyfriend never puts pictures of me on Instagram. We do many Instagrammable brunches that he takes pictures of, but not even my hands are ever in shot. I'm never even in the background of cute sunset photos should I confront him about it. I think Instagrammable brunches is a good name for a band. Anyway, look, I'm getting off topic. What do you think of that?
Not even the hands. Has he got a secret wife? What's going on? I mean,
well,
this
it's suggestive, isn't it? It suggests that he's keeping her out of the public eye for a reason.
Sound like it.
I think he's definitely a bigamist.
There you go.
What do you think, Steve?
Firstly, check how bad your hands are, because if you've really got some gnarly ones, then you better get them away from... Come on, get them away from my bruschetta.
It could be an aesthetic thing.
Yeah,
which is also offensive if you're going out with someone.
Yeah. Well, you could overlook bad hands, couldn't you?
You could.
But also, don't be one of those people who wants to be on Instagram. Oh, let's take this and put it on Instagram.
Yes.
Oh, you're as bad as dog rescuers.
Steve very much laying his cards on the table tonight. Well, look, thanks so much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when James May got into trouble over pride flags, and Carry On fans finally got the reboot they've not really been waiting for. Thank you to my panel, Cressida Wetton and Steve N. Allen, and to my guests, Ella Whelan, Emma Webb, Charlie Rowley and James Lindsay. And if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our lovely studio audience, that's dead easy. You just go to www.sroaudiences.com. Stay tuned for Mark Dolan tonight. That's coming up next. And please don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the late night paper preview show where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. Thank you for watching Free Speech Nation. I'll see you next week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the